live from the NASDAQ market side overlooking what else? New York's Times Square. This is Fast Money. I'm Brian, and once again for Melissa Lee, your traders on the desk are Tim Seymour, Jeff Mills, welcome, Brian Kelly, and Steve Grasso. Tonight on Fast, shares of Canopy Growth sparking a rally in the pot stocks today. Why bad news is not so bad news in this sector. We'll dig in. Plus, for your chart of the week, we're looking at a name that we all kind of, left for dead not that long ago. Well, maybe not everyone around the table. So is the current rally for real? We'll get some answers. And love, exciting and new. It's in the air this Valentine's Day, but Wall Street's really sweet on a couple of stocks.
Nice.
Will these be lasting romances or investors flirting with disaster? We're going to do sort of the like or not or hot or not, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, would you
right
rather?
Or left swipe.
All that ahead. Left or right, whatever it might be. We don't care. All right. All that ahead. But we start with some big breaking news on the biggest name in investing. Who else but Warren Buffett? The latest quarterly filing from his Berkshire Hathaway showing some outsized moves from Omaha. Here is the rundown that Berkshire started new positions in. Kroger, that stock getting a nice pop, 18 million share new stake over the quarter. Biogen IDEC, a new stake. And Berkshire also bought two S&P 500 ETFs, the SPY and the VOO. Now, Berkshire, and I say Berkshire because remember, this could be Warren himself, could be Todd Combs, could be some of the other fund managers there. It doesn't necessarily mean Warren himself. Berkshire raised stakes in General Motors, Occidental Petroleum, Restoration Hardware, and Suncor Energy. And by my math, he sold a massive 60-some million share stake in Wells Fargo, as well as trimming some Goldman Sachs. Tim Seymour, there is a lot to dig into here. What of any of those moves really sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, the move in Kroger certainly is interesting because, first of all, Kroger had a massive move into year end. So, depending on, again, you get this information, it's somewhat dated in hindsight. But the question for me, look, profits in supermarkets are only going one way. Look at this. They're going down. And ultimately, I think you have a dynamic here where you have a very overstored, a very overly competitive landscape where I think we know all the big box stores that are involved. I would not be a major buyer of Kroger here, but I do think that there's been a turnaround there and there's been a margin story. And you have to give the Oracle of Omaha the ability to say across all of his different properties, they must be seeing something. I believe that that's part of the insight that you have when you're Berkshire Hathaway is to be able to see through some of your other portfolio companies into others you may.
And the one thing about these 13Fs, and before we get to you, BK, that we got to remind our viewers, to your point, they are backdated.
Yep.
It's what they owned at the quarter. But the Berkshire ones are a little different, maybe better because they're longer term. I mean, these aren't ones that change quarter to quarter.
Right.
These are holdings that we'll see. There's a bird in here. This is like Animal Week.
Wow.
Dogs and birds. Kroger, are you shocked by that?
So I'm actually not that shocked by Kroger as I'm more shocked by the bird behind us than I am by Kroger.
I thought it was a Kroger.
By the way, it's a lovebird.
There you go.
Wow.
But
winner. Hope he doesn't tweet.
That's peak Tim right there.
Man, this is so good. Go ahead, BK.
All right, now
continue with your boring
now let
stuff
me help
while
the
these
American
guys are
public
being
out.
witty.
All right, so Kroger, of all of the names that he's involved in, doesn't surprise me that much because this seems to me like a classic Buffett story. He bets on things that don't change that much. You're always going to go to the grocery store. He bets on things that pay a nice dividend yield. This pays 2.27% prior to this big move. That's much better than you can get in 10-year Treasury bonds. That's a classic Buffett move, in my opinion. So that doesn't surprise me. I find the selling of Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs kind of interesting because they finally kind of just got some momentum here. So he's selling into that momentum. And again, to your point, Brian, you can look at these and say, all right, if Berkshire's getting into it, they're seeing something. He's famously said, if the stock market closed for 5 years, I'd still want to hold these positions. So you can say, hey, these are long-term positions for him.
Yeah, but for me, I think we're assuming that it's Warren. I don't know if it's Warren. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't feel very Warren-esque to me. Kroger doesn't feel Warren-esque to me. Wells Fargo and Goldman, it feels like the changing of the guard. I don't think it's him.
Those are residual holdings from the financial crisis.
I think it's a different
60
environment.
million shares of Wells Fargo.
And it trades
I think it's
like
a different.
It trades like
it. Feels like it's a different environment. It feels like getting rid of the financials is not a Warren thing to do. I'd rather be a buyer of the IBB versus Biogen. Has he ever bought a biotech?
No, that was surprising.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Jeff. That is an interesting one. And again, we don't know if it's Warren himself. Could be Todd Combs, could be somebody else. But a new stake in Biogen IDIC.
Yeah, I was surprised there, too. I mean, you just look at a name that volatile, it doesn't look like a stock typically that they would get involved in. If you look at the IBB, just as an example, though, it struggled at this 122 level, basically exactly where it is right now. So I think the coming days, weeks are going to be really telling for the overall sector. If you look at Biogen specifically at 10 times earnings, I think you could make a valuation argument there. And the chart does look like it's hooking a little bit higher, the 200 days moving up a bit. So I can understand that perhaps there's a catch-up trade, Biogen versus the overall IBB. We'll see.
You know, also, do you take any solace in the macro market? Anybody that he bought a number of shares of the SPY and the VOO, basically two S&P 500
No,
ETFs?
he's constantly long. He's constantly long. I don't think you can take any short or medium term signal from what Warren Buffett is doing buying the market, because he's buying that for 25 years.
But isn't this exactly what we've been talking about? We talk about liquidity in the market. I mean, Warren Buffett's, again, whoever's making the call on the portfolio, they're very in touch with the liquidity trends in the overall market. But we talk about the Federal Reserve and how it's just flowing into passively, and that they're not passive there per se. They are long term, but I do think this is almost a balance sheet management treasury function when you see them buying the
He always
S&P.
tries to mimic the market. So to that point, I guess you stay in line with whatever your
And
benchmark
very
is.
quickly notable, we talk about ESG investing. Not a lot here. He added to Occidental and added to Suncor, which is a big Canadian.
Didn't get the
They
memo.
didn't get the memo out in Omaha. All right.